Okay, time for the very last video lecture for our class, and it's going to be a pretty short one, so don't worry. Um, I just have sort of maybe three main points to hit. So they're all about applying care ethics. Part of the reason care ethics took off so well when Carol Gilligan introduced it in the 1980s was that it spoke to a lot of feminists who they looked at philosophy and they said, well, I mean, philosophy and ethics are great. They've done a lot of good. But it's kind of odd because it's been so male dominated. Like Aristotle, Kant, Mill, Bentham, these are all men. Um, and if ethics sort of relies on how you live and your experience, then isn't it going to be kind of one sided that most of the time it's done by men? In the societies we've lived in, for the most part, men and women have lived very different kinds of lives because of sexism, because of gender norms, all that kind of stuff. So isn't ethics going to be limited by the fact that it's done mostly by men from this one perspective? So part of what made Gilligan so exciting in philosophy was that she said, let's start with women's experience of caring for other people, of being in the caring professions like nursing, of doing caring roles like parenthood. Start with the perspectives of women, and then also notice that there's a lot of morally significant stuff to the things that women do that are often just ignored. You think about a lot of ethical debates people like to have, they're often about big political, public kind of things like should we allow abortion in our society as a whole, or that kind of stuff. Should animals ever be treated this way in factory farming? There's often not a lot of stuff about things like how should we raise children, what kind of stuff do nurses do that we might learn from. So feminists were really excited because Gilligan came along and said, hey, we can learn a lot about ethics from what women do. Here's some things we can learn. And also, what does that show us? That shows us that the stuff women often do is just as important and significant as the stuff that men are often allowed to do. So care ethics was seen as being really helpful for feminism and as being really helpful for ethics. And Anca Gheaus, in her paper, has kind of a similar two-way thing. She's interested in the ways care ethics can illuminate animal ethics, and she's interested in the ways thinking about animals can help us think about care ethics, right? So she thinks, first of all, what does care ethics tell us about animals? Well, you might think it's kind of a puzzle that we care so much about animals, that we bring them into our homes, we pay for them when they have medical expenses. Even back in ancient times, like in the Bible, there are stories about people keeping lambs as pets and like snuggling them at night and letting them eat at the table with the family and stuff. And you might think, well, they have such different lives from us. How are we able to care about them and relate to them? Anca Gheaus thinks care ethics can help explain that, because care ethics points out a lot of times the care and connection and relationship we form is need-based. If you think back to the previous lecture, I said care ethics is unlike justice ethics because care ethics focuses so much on needs. How do we meet needs? What are our needs? And Gheaus says, if you think about it, most animals share basic needs that we have because we all have bodies. This is a big point feminism always wants to make. Don't forget that you have a body. You have a body that was born, that needs food to survive, that could get sick or injured in various ways, that is going to die. And all that is true of animals as well. So we share those basic bodily needs. A lot of us share emotional and social needs with certain kinds of animals. Like dogs are a social species. They do better when they get attention from other living beings. Um, so, how are we able to connect and relate to other animals? Well, care ethics does a good job explaining that a big part of that is because we share so many needs with other animals because of the similar kind of body we have. That's what care ethics can do in talking about animals. What can thinking about animals do in thinking about care ethics? Well, you remember care ethics by itself has a big problem thinking about how do we expand our concern beyond the people that we know and love already. If care ethics is so much about relationships and connection and that kind of stuff, you might think, well, that means I should care about my mom and my friends, but nobody else, right? How do we get around that? Well, Anca Gheaus says, you think about like a small household. A lot of times, kids first learn big life lessons with animals. They learn about birth, like if their cat has a bunch of kittens. A lot of times, that's how they learn about death and grief, like when their dog dies or their fish dies or whatever. So we learn in very small, intimate contexts. And then we're able to think kind of by analogy about bigger contexts. I remember when my first dog died and the grief that I felt. And that's a big lesson that I can extend, to when other people's dogs die and also to when they lose relatives or friends. And, in the same way, the lessons I learn sort of in my intimate relationships with my parents, my siblings, and my friends, I can think, well, other people are having those kind of experiences too. And so thinking about the way that we start with small, familiar examples, and that's how we expand our awareness so that we can think about more distant, remote examples. Anca Gheaus thinks that's one way that thinking about animals and pets and family can explain a way that care ethics could modify itself so that it could say, here's how you care about other people, strangers, people who are far away, people in other countries. You think about what your intimate experiences are like, and then you remember that other people have those same kind of experiences. And that's your basis for sort of connecting with them, even though you're not as intimately connected as you are with your own friends and family and pets. So that's the final lecture for the class. You've got one more quiz, one more short paper, and then that's it. You've made it through a very weird semester. Thanks to all those who've reached out. It's always good to hear from you, hear how you're doing. You can continue to do so if there's anything you need. Thanks to all those who have kept at it through thick and thin. I understand it's been really tough. It's been very disruptive, and you've had a lot of other stuff going on. But don't beat yourself up, and take some well-deserved rest, I hope. And I wish you the best after this.